So we're going to look at synthetic division here in this part 2. And with synthetic division, first of all, synthetic division only works when you're dividing by something in the form x minus a. Okay, so some of the division we did yesterday, we couldn't use synthetic division for. Like I think our last problem was dividing by like 4x squared plus 9 or something like that. We couldn't use synthetic division there. But something, as long as it's x to the first plus or minus a number, you can use synthetic division. Okay? So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up a little box here. And this little box is going to hold in it a number that represents what we're dividing by. Now, we're dividing by x minus 5, yes? Excuse me, x plus 5. Okay? We're going to use, so what we're basically putting in that box is our a value. What I always suggest is think of this x plus 5 as equal to 0. And if you solve that, what are you going to get? You're going to subtract 5, x equals negative 5. That negative 5 is my a value. And that goes in the box right here. Okay? So that represents the x plus 5 that we're dividing by. So you're always going to, when they give it to you in this form of x plus or minus a number, you're always going to use opposite the sign. Now, beside this, we're going to make a list of numbers, which basically are the coefficients from our dividend here. So the coefficients of 4x squared plus 23x minus 16. So the x squared term is going to be represented by 4. The x to the first term is going to be represented by 23, and the constant term is represented by negative 16. I'm going to leave room to put a row of numbers, and then I'm going to draw a line. I'm writing kind of big, I'm realizing. Okay, this is our setup for synthetic division. Are you with me? Now, first thing you're always going to do is you're always going to start by just dropping the 4 down, or whatever your first number is. So we're going to drop our 4 down here. Okay? Then, your next step is a multiplication step. So we're always going to take this negative 5, and we're going to take negative 5, we're going to multiply it by whatever we have here, and we're going to put that answer up here under the 23. So what is negative 5 times 4? Negative 20. And the negative 20 goes right there. Okay, so you multiplied to get that number. And now we're going to add. What is 23 plus negative 20?
Excuse-moi.
What is 23 plus negative 20? 3. So where do we put the 3? Right down here. Okay, so we got that. I don't normally put this sign in, but we got that by adding, right? And then we're going to repeat the process. So this time we're going to take negative 5, and we're going to multiply it by 3. What is negative 5 times 3? Negative 15, and we're going to bounce it up underneath the negative 16. And again, we're going to add. What is negative 16 plus negative 15?
Negative 31.
Negative 16 plus negative 15 is negative 31.
I'm so stupid.
You're getting your careless math mistakes out of the way now. That's what you're trying to do. Okay. Now, this 4, 3, and negative 31 represent your answer. Okay. Now we put the variables back in there. And what I will say, first of all, your last number here is your remainder. So I'm going to have a remainder of negative 31. Okay? A remainder can be negative? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just checking in. I'm gonna go.
This is for the office.
Oh, okay, you're going home? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Ooh, yeah, that reminds me, there's something, note I have to give to the office today, but I didn't, because I had to leave earlier, yesterday.
Okay, set it out and we'll get to it at the end of class, okay? Okay. Remainder is negative 31, okay? Now, keep in mind, what did this 4 originally represent? This 4 originally represented a 4x squared, yes? Keep in mind, we divided an x away. If you start off with x squared and you divide an x away, what does this represent now? That's a 4x. So that's your highest term here. It was always 1 less than what you started with, and you just go down from there. So thus, my answer is going to be 4x plus 3. And then how were we expressing our remainders yesterday?
Over like the -5.
Okay, except what does that -5 represent? It represents x plus 5. So we're going to say this is minus 31 over x plus 5. I feel like the hardest part of this is getting the answer back in its form. But give me a couple examples to sell you on this. I really think you'll like it. Anything's better than long division though, right? Okay, questions here. Now, if you do me a favor and you flip back to the first long division example we did yesterday, with the variables in it, guess what? It was the same problem. 4x squared plus 23x minus 16 divided by x plus 5. That's that same question. We just used synthetic division to do it. Okay? So the first polynomial long division we did yesterday. Not the first long division, I guess. Okay. Questions at this point? Maybe a little too much confusion to have questions yet. We need to try another one. Okay. That's good. Okay, let's try this next one. X cubed minus 14x squared plus 51x minus 54 divided by x minus 2. Okay. What number is going to go in my box?
It's gonna be 2.
Okay, so since this is x minus a, we're using the opposite sign here. So since this is, I think of as x minus 2 equals 0, so if we're solving, we're going to use 2. So 2 goes in the box, okay? Now, we need our coefficients. Now, one thing I need to remember, like yesterday, we always have to make sure everything's in place. So what are we starting with? We have an x cubed term. What's the coefficient of x cubed?
1.
Invisible 1. Coefficient of x squared?
14.
Negative 14. Coefficient of x? 51. Constant? Negative 54. So I just took my numbers from the front and put them down. I'm going to leave a line for work. I'll leave room for a line of numbers and draw my line. Okay? Now, do you remember the first step?
Carry down the 1.
Okay, whatever this first number is here, you carry it down, which in this case is a 1. Then
2 times the 1.
we're going to multiply. So 2 times 1 is 2. That goes up under the negative 14. What do I do with negative 14 and 2? We add. Negative 14 plus 2 is? Negative 12. Repeat the process. Now it's 2 times negative 12. 2 times negative 12 is? Negative 24. It goes underneath the 51. And now we're going to add. 51 plus negative 24.
26. 27.
I like 27 better. Okay? And it's always an adding step on these. Okay, that's the one big difference, because in long division we always had to subtract. Synthetic division is nicer. We just get to add. Multiply, add. Multiply, add. Okay, so we added. Now what? 2 times 27 is 54. Add. Negative 54 plus 54.
0.
0. What does that 0 represent?
Remainder.
Remainder. Can we have a remainder of 0?
No.
Yeah, we can.
But we didn't have to put it, or you just not.
Well, we put the 0 to complete our synthetic division, but I'm not going to, when I go back and list my answer, I'm not going to list it as part of my answer. Okay? Now, so the 0 I won't have to list. That's my remainder. 1, negative 12, and 27 represent my answer. You've got to put your variables back in.
1x squared. Negative 12x.
And?
27.
Okay. Now, why did she start with x squared?
Could divide it off an x.
Okay. My original thing was an x cubed. And if you divide off an x, you're now going to be at x squared. It's always going to be 1 power lower than what you started with. Another way to look at it, count from here. If this is a remainder, this is your constant, your x to the first, your x to the second. So could you work your way backwards there? Okay, questions?
Excuse me.
Okay, let's try the next one then. Now, stay with me on setup on this one. What goes in the box?
3.
3 goes in the box, yes? Because it's from this form, x minus a. Or just think of it as solving for x. So we're going to use 3.
We're gonna have to put one row of 0x.
Okay, so what's the first thing we're going to start with is a 2, yes? That 2 is the coefficient of x to the third. What comes after an x to the third term? X to the second. Do I have an x to the second? Yeah, so I'm going to put a negative 7. What comes after an x to the second term? An x to the first term. Do I have an x to the first term? No, so what am I going to say we put? A placeholder 0 again. Even more important than yesterday, because I don't have x's to work with here, right? So you need those zeros in. So that 0 represents x to the first. What comes after an x to the first term? A constant. Do I have a constant? Negative 4. So 2, negative 7, 0, negative 4. I'm going to leave a room for a row of numbers and draw my line. Okay, you ready? What are you doing first? You guys good? Dropping the 2. Then what? Multiply 3 times 2 is 6. We're going to add negative 7 plus 6 is negative 1. Now what?
3 times negative 1.
Okay, go back for the 3. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. Where do I put it?
Below 0.
Under the 0. Now we're going to
Good
add
add.
negative 3, or 0 plus negative 3.
Negative 3.
Negative 3. Then what?
3 times negative 3.
Okay, we're going to multiply. Original 3 times negative 3, which is
Negative 9.
negative 9. I put it under the negative 4. Now we're going to add negative 4 plus negative 9.
Negative 13.
Negative 13. Okay, guys. Can you write your answer?
2x squared negative 1x 3 and then x minus 3 minus negative 13 over negative x minus 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yep. Okay, guys. So this original 2 up here was 2x cubed. So that means this one, you divided an x away, so it becomes 2x squared, yes? So 2x squared minus 1x minus 3 is your constant. And then this minus 13 is a remainder, so it's minus 13 over your original divisor of x minus 3. We have questions we need to ask? Have I sold you? Is this easier than long division?
Yeah.
I think it is.
I want to cry over this. No, I cried over it.
It's a little bit harder to teach just because it's totally brand new and, you know, I'm teaching a brand new process, but once you guys get it, easy peasy. Okay. Last just practice example, and then we're going to use synthetic division and do a couple of other things here. What goes in my box? Yes? You've got 1 in there. So remember, it's because x minus 1. So use the opposite of that sign. Okay, what goes in my row of numbers next to the 1? We start with a 3. What goes next?
0.
Ah, why do we have a 0 next?
X.
There's no x squared, right? So we had 3 for the x cubed, 0 for the x squared. What goes next? Now we have x to the first, so it's a negative 5, and then 10 for your constant. Okay. And first step is to drop the 3 and
1 times 3.
multiply, right? 1 times 3 is
3.
3. And then you're going to add. 0 plus 3 is
3.
3. And then I'm going to
Times 3.
1 times.
Yeah.
1. Original 1 times 3 is
3.
3. We're going to add. Negative 5 plus 3,
Negative 2.
negative 2. And then,
1 times negative 2.
okay, the 1 here times negative 2 is negative 2. What am I doing with 10 and negative 2? Adding. 10 plus negative 2 is 8. Okay. The hardest part maybe, expressing your answer. What's this first 3 represent? 3x squared. Plus 3x to the first. Minus 2 is a constant.
8 over x minus 1.
Plus the remainder of 8 over the original divisor of x minus 1. Okay. How we doing? Got the basics. I'm boring you, right? Okay, guys. Synthetic division. We're going to go move forward and use it in conjunction with the factor theorem and remainder theorem. We'll talk about how they apply here. And so the bottom of the front here talks about something called the remainder theorem. Now, with the remainder theorem, the idea is if a polynomial, p of x, known as, is divided by a linear divisor, x minus a, which is what we've been doing, then the remainder is p of a. Okay, so basically we're going to talk about a different way to find the remainder. if they're asking, so in example A, for P of X divided by this X minus A, if they're asking for remainder, could we still use synthetic division to find the remainder? You can. Now, before we do that, I'm going to show you one other way where they talk about, and it's hidden back here, isn't it? The remainder is, and that's back there says P of A. Okay, that is your remainder. So you can use synthetic division. I'm totally okay with that. Or we can use this other way. So I'm going to show you two different ways to do this. And okay, so for the polynomial P of X, you have this x cubed plus 8x squared plus 12x plus 5, and C equals -2. They want you to find P of C. We're going to do this two different ways, A by direct substitution and B by the remainder theorem. So we're going to talk direct substitution. Okay? Direct substitution says you take this number and we plug it in. How do I find P of -2? We're going to take -2. Every place you see an X, I'm going to replace it with -2. So in other words, I'm going to do x to the third, so -2 to the third, plus 8 times -2 to the second, plus 12 times -2, plus 5. So in other words, one way to find the remainder is to use direct substitution. Folks, it's do the math. Might require a calculator, you know. What is -2 to the third?
-8.
-2 times -2 is 4, times another -2 is -8. Plus, what is -2 to the second?
4.
4 times 8?
32.
32. Plus, what is 12 times -2? -24. And then plus 5. So -8 plus 32 minus 24 plus 5. Do some math. Or let the calculator do some math. Uh-huh. My brain says -8 and -24. When I put those together are -32. -32 plus 32 cancels, and I'm left with 5. So when we plug that in, we got 5. That would be the remainder if we divided x cubed plus 8x squared plus 12x plus 5 by x minus this value, so x minus -2. That's one option, direct substitution. You can use that to find a remainder. What's the other option? They call it the remainder theorem. But we're just going to use synthetic division here. Set up synthetic division. What would you be putting in the box here? Now, this one is a little different. We're actually going to use -2. So note the difference here. They gave me C equals -2, right? If they tell you C equals or A equals, you use that value. It's when they give it in the form like x plus 2, that's when you change the sign, okay? So we're going to use -2. What's my row of numbers that go here? What are my coefficients? 1 from the x cubed, 8 from x squared, 12 from x, and 5 is my constant. Okay, guys, synthetic division. What are we going to do? We're going to drop the 1. -2 times 1 is -2. 8 plus negative 2? 6.
Times 6.
Negative 2 times 6.
12.
Negative 12. 12 plus negative 12?
0.
0. Negative 2 times 0?
Negative 2. 0. Oh.
0. And then 5 plus 0?
5.
5. What's my remainder?
5.
5. Did we get the same answer both ways? We did. Okay.
They want the remainder.
They want the remainder.
Oh.
Okay. So when they ask, now they could ask you to do it two different ways. If they ask you to find p of negative 2, you can either plug the negative 2 in and do it that way, which the math is usually a little harder that way, isn't it? You might have actually had to get a calculator out here. Or, even if they ask p of negative 2, you can use synthetic division. Okay?
Can you use synthetic division for like what we did yesterday?
On some of them. On some of them. In other words, if it's dividing by just x to the first plus or minus a number. Okay? So you couldn't have used it on, like I said, only one you couldn't have used it on yet, well, you couldn't have used it on the back two yesterday. Because the top back one was dividing by 2x plus 3. That doesn't have to be x plus or minus number, and this one was dividing by 4x squared plus 9. Okay? Okay. So let's try B. For the given polynomial and the given C, use the remainder theorem to find P of C. Does it tell you how to do it? No. When they ask you to find P of C, what is my C value? Oops, it kind of got blended in there. Did you see that? Negative 5. So they're asking you to find P of negative 5. What are options? One option is to direct substitution. Can we plug it in? Yeah. Negative 5 to the third plus 10 times negative 5 squared plus 29 times negative 5 plus 24. You guys are going to use the calculator and speed things up on me, right? All I did was plug negative 5 in. Do you have to do it this way? Does it say we have to do it this way? No. What's the other option then? What's the easier option? Are we talking about this one? Synthetic division, right? Okay. Could you use synthetic division?
I hope so.
Sure. What goes in the box if we use synthetic division?
Negative 5.
Negative 5. And then what is my row of numbers next to the box?
1, 10, 24.
Coefficients from 1x cubed, 10x squared, 29x, and 24. Okay. Drop the 1. Negative 5 times 1?
Negative 5.
Negative 5. 10 plus negative 5?
5.
5. Negative 5 times 5?
Negative 25.
Negative 25. 29 plus negative 25? 4. Negative 5 times 4? Negative 20. 24 plus negative 20?
4.
4. What would be my answer to this problem?
4.
4. Now, did anyone finish this way out? Negative 5 cubed would be negative 125. Negative 5 squared would be 25 times 10, so that's plus 250. 29 times negative 5 is not on the top of my brain.
Yep, mine either.
45. Yeah, there we go. Negative 145 plus 24. I don't have an easy way. Negative 125 plus 250 is going to be positive 125. 125 minus 145 is going to be negative 20. Negative 20 plus 24 is going to be, guess what? 4. Now, where are you more comfortable?
The right side. Synthetic division.
Okay. Now, if you have a calculator, was this that bad? No, not at all. But the advantage of synthetic division, did I even pick up a calculator?
Oh, no.
Well, I didn't pick up a calculator with either, but you know what I mean. Okay? Okay, so in homework. Now, here's the deal. If you ask Savas for help, they might take you this way. But realize if they start taking you this way, your brain needs to click and say, oh, I could do synthetic division too. Okay? Okay, on the back side.
Oh.
That was the remainder theorem. Okay, that was talking about find a remainder. The factor theorem. We talked about this yesterday, just not by name. The factor theorem basically says that the binomial x minus a is a factor of p of x if and only if p of a equals 0. This is fancy speak for saying if the remainder equals 0. Okay? So it's a factor if the remainder is 0. I talked about that yesterday, didn't I? Okay? And I don't know how many of you have done the homework yet, but you might have to write them in factored form. Guess what? Same thing here. You might have to write it in factored form. So, now note, what's the nice change? Use synthetic division and the factor theorem to determine if x minus c is a factor. If it's a factor, what will be true? The remainder will be 0. Okay, so let's decide. Is x minus 4 a factor of p of x here? Let's find out. If it's a factor, what's the remainder? So, what goes in my box?
4.
Okay, did you realize they gave it as x minus 4? This is where you use opposite sign, right? Are we catching on? Okay, what goes next to my box? 1, negative 10, 28, negative 16. No missing terms there, right? It's x cubed, x squared, x, and constant. First thing we're going to do is drop the 1. Then we're going to multiply. 4 times 1 is 4. Then I'm going to add. Negative 10 plus 4 is negative 6. Then I'm going to multiply. 4 times negative 6 is negative 24. And then I'm going to add. 28 plus negative 24, 4. And then we're going to multiply. 4 times 4 is 16. And then we're going to add. Negative 16 plus 16 is 0. What's that tell me?
It is a factor.
Yeah. Remainder of 0 means x minus 4 is a factor. I'm just going to write out exactly what I said. Remainder 0 means x minus 4 is a factor. Okay. Now, what I'm guessing you're going to have to write, based on my notes, I'm guessing you're going to have to write factored form. Now, the pieces are here. We just said that x minus 4 is a factor, yes? So one of my pieces is x minus 4. When we divided by x minus 4, what did we get? We got a remainder of 0, but what did we get as an answer?
X squared negative 6x
I'm with her. You guys with her?
Yeah.
In other words, we divided by x minus 4. We got a remainder of 0. So what we divided by and what we got are both factors. So x minus 4 is a factor and x squared minus 6x plus 4. So if they ask you to write factored form, that's what you're looking for.
Basically what we were writing, just without the remainder over the thing.
Yeah, just the answer basically. And you're showing that it multiplies by x minus 4. Okay? That's if the remainder is 0. They're going to say, okay, now write it in factored form then, since the remainder is 0. Okay, one more. B. They give us p of x. They give us a binomial. We want to know, is it a factor? So, what goes in my box? Okay. Since this is x plus 5, you're using the opposite sign. So negative 5 in my box. What's the first number that goes next to my box? 2. That's the x to the 4th. What goes next? 9, because it's x to the 3rd. Then negative 2 for x squared. 6. Negative 40. No missing pieces, right? Okay. First step. Bring down the 2. Then what?
2 times negative 5.
Okay, we're going to multiply. Negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. Bounce it back up under the 9. Then I'm going to add 9 plus negative 10.
1.
Negative 1.
4.
Then we're going to multiply.
Negative 5.
Negative 5
5.
times negative 1 is 5. And now I'm going to add. Negative 2 plus 5? 3. And now I'm going to multiply. Negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. Now I'm going to add. 6 plus negative 15? Negative 9. And now I'm going to multiply. Negative 5 times negative 9 is 45. And we're going to add. Negative 40 plus 45?
5.
5. What do I know?
It's not.
It's not.
Okay.
Oh no.
Since I had a remainder that is not 0, then it is not a factor. Thus, not a factor. Okay? So remainder was not 0, so not a factor. Okay, guys. That's the notes for this week. Okay? You've seen long division yesterday, synthetic division today. You've got homework on each. Okay? So, your job to start doing is to start making sure you're getting through your SOVISes, yes? 3.3 from last week. Okay? 3.4 part 1 is long division. 3.4 part 2 is synthetic division. I'm done teaching this week. Okay? No more new lessons this week. Tomorrow and Thursday.
This month.
This month. I'm done teaching this month. Okay. Okay. Tomorrow and Thursday. Tomorrow I have a review worksheet for you. It's a work day tomorrow. I would encourage you to get some of your SOVIS done, but if you have questions, bring those tomorrow and I'll help you get them figured out. And then you'll have some time to work on the review worksheet. Thursday, I definitely want to try and go over any questions you have on the review worksheet. Friday is quiz. Okay?